Lesson 3: The First Political Parties. It matters because our nation's two-party political system developed from Americans taking opposing sides on political issues. Opposing parties. Guiding question: how did different opinions lead to the first political parties? The American people generally admired President Washington and his service to the nation. Still, harsh attacks appeared from time to time in newspapers. One paper even called Washington the scourge and the misfortune of his country. Most of the attacks on Washington came from supporters of Thomas Jefferson. They hoped to weaken support for the policies of Alexander Hamilton, which the president seemed to favor. In fact, by 1796, the supporters of Jefferson and Hamilton were beginning to form the nation's first political parties. At that time, many Americans thought political parties were harmful to good government. The Constitution made no mention of parties because its authors saw no good use for them. Washington disapproved of political parties, or factions, as they were known. He warned that they would divide the nation. To others, though, it seemed natural that people would disagree about issues. They also knew that people who hold similar views tend to band together. Washington's cabinet was clearly divided on key issues. Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson had very different views. They disagreed on economic policy and foreign relations. They did not share the same opinion on the power of the federal government or on the meaning of the Constitution. Even Washington was partisan, clearly favoring one faction. The president believed he stood above politics, but he usually supported Hamilton's views. Thinking like a historian. Analyzing political cartoons. Newspaper. Political parties emerge. The differences found in Washington's cabinet also existed in Congress and among the public. They formed the basis for two distinct political parties that emerged at this time. One party was the Federalists. Led by Hamilton, this group favored a strong federal government. They believed the Constitution gave government implied powers. These implied powers are not enumerated or listed clearly in the Constitution. Instead, Federalists believed the enumerated powers implied the power to do other things. Federalists believed Congress could make all laws necessary and proper to carry out its enumerated powers. The Democratic Republicans, or Republicans, stood against the Federalists. Jefferson and Madison led this faction. They believed in a strict reading of the Constitution. They rejected the Federalist idea of implied powers. They believed congressional powers were limited to what is absolutely necessary to carry out the enumerated powers. Debate over the national bank highlighted these differences. The Constitution gave Congress specific powers to do such things as issue and borrow money. To Hamilton, this implied that the federal government could create a bank to help with these tasks. Jefferson disagreed. The role of the people. The two parties also disagreed about the role of ordinary citizens in government. Federalists supported representative government, in which elected officials ruled in the people's name. They did not believe it was wise to let the public become too involved in politics. Federalists thought that educated, wealthier men should hold public office. They did not trust ordinary people to make good decisions. In Hamilton's words, "The people are turbulent and changing. They seldom judge or determine right." The Republicans feared a strong central government controlled by only a few people. They believed that democracy and liberty would be safe only if ordinary people took part fully in government. As Jefferson wrote in a letter, "I am not among those who fear the people. They, and not the rich, are our dependents, what we depend on, for continued freedom." Washington's reaction. The growing differences between the parties, and between Hamilton and Jefferson, troubled President Washington. He tried to get his two cabinet members to work out their differences. He wrote to Jefferson trying to persuade him, "I ardently wish that some line could be marked out by which both of you could walk." Washington's efforts to get Jefferson and Hamilton to work together failed. The split was so strong that Jefferson left the cabinet and his job as Secretary of State. Soon afterward, Hamilton resigned as Secretary of the Treasury. The rival groups and their points of view moved further apart. As the election of 1796 approached, the two parties each prepared to seek control of the presidency. The presidential election of 1796. To prepare for the election, both parties held caucuses. At these meetings, members of Congress and other leaders nominated or chose their party's candidates for office. Each party chose two presidential candidates, and the electors voted for any two. The Federalists chose John Adams and Charles Pinckney. The Republicans chose Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. There was no candidate identified as a vice presidential candidate on the ballot. The Federalists carried the New England region. Republican strength lay in the southern states. Adams got 71 electoral votes, winning the election. Jefferson finished second with 68 votes. Under the rules of the Constitution at that time, the person with the second highest electoral vote total, Jefferson, became vice president. The administration that took office on March 4, 1797, had a Federalist president and a Republican vice president. Progress check. Contrasting. How did the election of 1796 differ from the first presidential elections? John Adams as president. Guiding question. What important events occurred during the presidency of John Adams? John Adams spent most of his life in public service. He was well known as one of Massachusetts' most active patriots in the period before and during the Revolutionary War. He served 2 terms as vice president under Washington before becoming president. His time in office, however, was troubled. The XYZ affair. The nation was in the middle of a dispute with France when Adams took office. The French viewed the 1794 Jayes Treaty as an American attempt to help the British in their war with France. To punish the United States, the French seized American ships that carried cargo to Britain. President Adams sent a team to Paris to try to resolve the dispute in the fall of 1797. French officials chose not to meet with the Americans. Instead, the French sent 3 agents who demanded a bribe and a loan for France from the Americans. The Americans refused. When Adams learned what had happened, he was furious. The president urged Congress to prepare for war. In his report to Congress, Adams used the letters X, Y, and Z in place of the French agents' names. As a result, the event came to be called the XYZ affair. Alien and Sedition Acts. When the public found out about the XYZ affair, many grew angry at foreign attempts to influence their government. They became more suspicious of aliens, residents who are not citizens. Many Europeans who had come to the United States in the 1790s supported the ideals of the French Revolution. Some Americans questioned whether these aliens would remain loyal if the United States went to war with France. In response to these concerns, Federalists in 1798 passed the Alien and Sedition Acts. Sedition means activities aimed at weakening the government. The Alien and Sedition Acts allowed the president to imprison aliens. The president could also deport, send out of the country, those thought to be dangerous. President Adams was a strong supporter of these laws. Domestic and Foreign Affairs. Democratic Republicans saw the Alien and Sedition Acts as Federalist tyranny. They looked to the states to respond and protect people's liberties. Madison and Jefferson wrote statements of protest that the Virginia and Kentucky legislatures passed as resolutions. The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions of 1798 and 1799 claimed that the Alien and Sedition Acts violated the Constitution. They declared that the states should not put them into action. The Kentucky resolution further said that states could nullify, legally overturn, federal laws they thought were unconstitutional. The resolutions supported the principle of states' rights. This principle held that the powers of the federal government were limited to those clearly granted by the Constitution. To prevent the federal government from becoming too powerful, the states should have all other powers not expressly forbidden to them. The issue of states' rights would remain an important issue in American politics for many years. Meanwhile, the Federalists urged Adams to declare war on France. Adams, however, resisted this pressure. Instead, he sent a representative to seek peace with France. In 1800, the French agreed to a treaty and stopped their attacks on American ships. Though it had benefits for the United States, the agreement with France was unpopular and hurt Adams's chance for re-election. Rather than cheering the agreement, Hamilton and his supporters opposed their own president. The Federalists were now split. This improved Democratic-Republican hopes for winning the presidency in the 1800 election.